When I started researching Macedonian history, there were many questions that I constantly asked myself. In the beginning, it was, are Macedonians connected to Bulgarians? A question that I found the answer to relatively quickly. That whole process in my head has been explained in my previous video. Once I discovered that the connection between Bulgarians and Macedonians, which was strongly claimed by Bulgarians online, was indeed true, the biggest question became, why? Why is the modern Macedonian identity so distorted and so disconnected from its Bulgarian roots? Bulgarians explained that distortion as a result of Tito's propaganda in Yugoslav Macedonia, where he, alongside his servants, the Titovci, brainwashed almost every Macedonian into believing they were something they were not. I'm not gonna sit here and defend Tito and Titovci, they definitely take a lot of the blame for the problems that exist to this day. However, the more I dug deeper, the more I realized that the ex-brainwashed Macedonians was a very oversimplified narrative and it didn't give the entire picture. After years of research, I can say that I've made many discoveries that were quite surprising, even shocking to me. One of those discoveries was the series of writings by one particular man from Macedonia, writings that pioneered the Macedonist viewpoint of Macedonian history and identity. The author of these writings was a man almost completely forgotten by both Macedonians and Bulgarians. In this video, I'll talk about him. Everyone, meet Angel Dinev, also known as Smokov, Danton, and Elixir. Dinev was born in the village of Smokvica, located around Gevgelija, on October 1st, 1891. His career includes working in Thessaloniki in the Bulgarian metropolis from 1909 to 1911, being an organizer of the temporary district committee of the Internal Macedonian Revolutionary Organization for the villages in the Gevgelija district, being a member of the Gevgelija District Revolutionary Committee since the fall of 1911, working as a secretary of a squad led by Costa Christov Popeto since May 1912, volunteering in the Macedonian Edrina militia during the First Balkan War, later volunteering in the 3rd Company of the 15th Shipka Regiment. He also served in the 11th Macedonian Infantry Division during World War I. After all the tragic events that happened, Dinev would move to Bulgaria's capital city, Sofia, in 1922, where he started working in the Ministry of Agriculture and then as a tram controller. During that time, he also started writing articles for a few newspapers, including Ilinden, Pirin, and July 20th. He wasn't just on newspapers, he will also write a book here and there. Now here's what's interesting. On the internet you can find some of his articles, such as Stubborn Priest, written for Ilinden in 1925, the development of the church educational work in the Gevgelija region, written for Macedonia in 1931, and From the Past of the Town of Gevgelija, also written for Macedonia, but in 1932. The books that Angel Dinev wrote were The Kresna Uprising in 1878, released in 1926, The Greek-Turkish Union Against the Internal Macedonian Revolution Organization, released in 1929, and The Hurriyet and the Post-Hurriyet Struggles in Gevgelija, released in 1934. What do all of them have in common? They all talked about Bulgarians in Macedonia, about Macedonian Bulgarians. Indeed, during that time, Angel Dinev viewed himself and the Slavic people of Macedonia as Bulgarians. Keyword, viewed. Around the end of 1934, so quite shortly after he released a book that talked about Macedonian Bulgarians, Mr. Dinev has seemingly overnight decided to reject everything he wrote until that point in his life and was like, you know what? There are no Macedonian Bulgarians. There are only Macedonian Slavs. And so on January 24th, 1935, the first issue of the weekly newspaper Macedonian News has been released in Sofia. The publisher and main editor was of course Angel Dinev, but there were other editors. Those were Vasil Ivanovsky, Mikhail Smatrkalev, Kosta Veselinov, and Dimitar Zafirovsky, all Macedonists. There were 74 issues of this newspaper released, last one being released on October 16, 1936. After that, it was banned by the Bulgarian government. Now you're probably wondering what was written in these newspapers. Well, pretty much everything the Bulgarians and to a lesser extent Greeks say today are historical lies. The contents of Macedonian News were discussed by Petar Galicin in his book Macedonian Literary Circle. Here's what he wrote. In Bulgaria, Some, mostly young, party activists and propagandists tried to present the Macedonian nation as the successor of a historically formed ethnic community. Their position was expressed by the publisher of Macedonian news, Angel Dinev, who in a series of articles tried to show the connection of this nation with the ancient Macedonians of Alexander the Great and with the oldest Slavic population in the Balkans. From these materials, we quote-unquote learn that the Macedonian state, called by him Slavunia, is the only earliest Slavic state that became independent, that the Thessaloniki brothers, Silur and Methodius, were Macedonians, and that through them Christianity and the Macedonian language were imposed on other Slavs, above all on the Bulgarians, that the Macedonian priest Bogomil, a native of Bogomila, Veles region, was the creator of the revolutionary movement against the Hunnish spirit of the Macedonian Bulgarians and patriarchs, and that then Macedonian literature reached its prime. Little side note, by Macedonian Bulgarians, Angel Dinev means a small group of Bulgarians who came to Macedonia as conquerors. Aside from the short text Why We Macedonians Are a Separate Nation, written by Vasil Ivanovsky in December of 1934, that was the first time in history that someone made those Macedonian historical claims that today are the subject of debate between Macedonians and Bulgarians and between Macedonians and Greeks. Dinev would later comment on the newspaper with the following words: "In 1935, Imre United has laid the foundation for Macedonian news. We won't speak about the role of the newspaper. Printed and non-printed responses speak about it with kind words. We have defended the Macedonian thesis down the false slogan Macedonian Bulgarians, long live our ethnographic idea." After Macedonian news has been banned, Angel Dinev would write the 72-page book, the first of its kind. It was released in 1938 and was named Macedonian Slavs. Now sadly, I've been trying to track this book online for months, but I couldn't find it anywhere. I have, however, found a couple of books that mention some things written there and a few shots of pages of the book in a documentary about Angel Dinev. Everything that he wrote in Macedonian news he also wrote in Macedonian Slavs, and more. This is the very first Macedonian history book ever written. According to an elderly gentleman from the documentary, that book was the main inspiration for the Macedonian ethnic separatists. Of course, not everyone was thrilled with Dinev's book. In his final book, Political Murders in Bulgaria, Angel Dinev wrote that Macedonian Slavs has made his opponents, the Mikhailovists, furious. There are reasons to believe him, as one man close to Mikhailovists and Verkhovisti in general was Stoyan Boyadjiev, who wrote a book named Does the Macedonian Nation Exist? In 1940, where for a good portion of that book he talks about the things written in Macedonian Slavs. Boyadjiev tried to debunk a few of Dinev's claims, such as this claim that Macedonians have not voluntarily joined Tsar Presian, that the first Macedonian state was the one ruled by Alexander the Great. For the record, Macedonian Slavs begins with the sentence, "Modern Macedonians are a mixture of Slavs and Illyrians," Illyrians being ancient Macedonians, that the second time a Macedonian state fell apart was after the death of Tsar Samuel, that Petr Delian was a Macedonian who rebelled against the Greeks, etc. Another book that also talked about Dinev's historical viewpoints was Macedonism and the Opposition of Macedonia Against It by Kosta Cernusharov, although it was released many decades after Macedonian Slavs. To be more precise, in 1992. Here Cernusharov wrote that Angel Dinev wrote about Macedonian Bulgarians in many of his writings, but then he changed his mind and wrote totally different things in Macedonian Slavs, including Klimen Ohridsky being Macedonian, Basil II being called the Bulgar Slayer because he conquered former Bulgarian lands instead of killing Bulgarians, Vasil Aprilov declaring war on the Macedonian literacy and forcing the Eastern Bulgarian speech, etc. Despite all of this, Angel Dinev didn't abandon his Macedonist beliefs. He defended the Macedonian nation strongly, not just against Bulgarians and Macedonians with Bulgarian conscience, but against everyone denying the existence of the Macedonian nation. In a Serbian cultural club in Belgrade on November 16, 1939, Belgrade University professor Nikola Vulic held a speech where he said that the terms Macedonia and Macedonians should be banned and that the terms South Serbia and South Serbs should be used instead. The following day, a Serbian newspaper by the name Time released Vulic's speech, and that made Angel Dinev write a letter to him. In the letter, Dinev protested against the words of that Serbian professor, but he also wrote that the historical figure King Marko was a Macedonian ruler, not a Serbian one. He also wrote, "It's sad that's the way the nation who gave the script and literacy to both Serbs and Bulgarians is being treated." Dinev continued his activity by writing more books. He also wrote and released The Ethnographic Idea of the Macedonian Slavs in 1944, the Iliad Epic Part 1 in 1945 and Part 2 in 1949, and finally, Political Murders in Bulgaria in 1951. Dinev passed away on February 17, 1952 at the age of 60. To his death, he kept his historical views that he got since 1934. You most likely are asking yourself, why? Why would Angel Dinev abandon his Bulgarian conscience and invent a new history for the Macedonian Bulgarians? You may think it's because of the comments and resolution on the Macedonian question and Emir United, because it was adopted in 1934, the same year that Dinev got his new historical views. While it played a role, it isn't the answer I'm going to give you. Of course, I can't see what was inside the head of this man, and I can only speculate, but I believe I have an answer. You see, even before he adopted Macedonism, Angel Dinev was critical of how Bulgaria was handling the Macedonian issue. The criticism was especially present in his final Macedonian-Bulgarian book, The Hurriyat and the Post-Hurriyat Struggles in Evgelia, while praising political separatism of centralisti such as Jan Sanansky. He was a separatist that took his separatism to the extremes that were unheard of during his life. Unfortunately, another one of his books I couldn't find was The Ethnographic Idea of Macedonian Slavs, but I have managed to dig up two quotes from the book that can explain his move towards Macedonism. The first one goes, "Backstone and other notable Englishmen have recognized us as Macedonians and have raised their voice in favor of our battle, Macedonia for the Macedonians. We ourselves have rejected our nationality and presenting ourselves as Macedonian Bulgarians who have made damages." The other quote goes like this, "Macedonian revolutionaries with the price of self-sacrifice have awakened the political conscience of the people. However, they haven't given the people the most important weapon. They haven't given the ethnic conscience." As you can see, Angel Dinev thought that only through complete distancing from Bulgaria can Macedonians liberate themselves and their land. This distancing was projected onto the past, like saying that Bogomilism was the result of Macedonian opposition to the Bulgarian state, or writing the more than likely fictional words of revolutionary Goce Delchev, who apparently wanted to free two Vrhovisti with the words, "Let those good people free. They aren't guilty. They have not realized themselves as Macedonians." Coupled with the fact that he wrote in the Iliad Epic books that the fight between the Centralisti and the Vrhovisti was between Macedonians and Bulgarians, you can see that Dinev was using his false historical narrative as a weapon that would have managed to pave the way for an independent Macedonia and the Macedonian nation. This was even mentioned one time by Macedonia's ex-prime minister Ljupcho Georgievski. His words were, "The lie that Vrhovisti viewed Macedonians as Bulgarians and that Centralisti wanted ethnic and language separatism was a lie by Bulgarian communists created in the battle against Bancho Mikhailov." Technically speaking, I can't say that Dinev's separatism wasn't successful, but I still strongly believe that there were better ways to solve the Macedonian question. Still, but I believe what should have been done with Macedonians in this context doesn't matter. The fact that this man, whom a fellow Emir United and Bulgarian communist Hristo Ampov called the progenitor of the Macedonian nation in Bulgaria, please remember that being a member of Emir United and Bulgarian Communist Party does not mean you're a Macedonist, is completely forgotten by the Bulgarian historiography and almost completely forgotten by the Macedonian historiography, tells me there is still a lot of things that both sides need to start discussing. Hopefully, this video will shed the light on this obscure historical figure and his hidden importance, and will encourage you to do a research of your own. Thank you for watching. I hope you liked this topic and video. Have a beautiful day and stay safe. Goodbye.